So we're looking at this massive pivot point, right? The DoD drops this class deviation, what was it, 2024-0013. And suddenly, everybody who was scrambling to figure out NIST SP 800-171 Revision 3 is told, wait, hold on. We are sticking with Revision 2 for now. It's a strategic pause, but it feels like a pressure cooker, because Revision 3 isn't actually going away, it's just hovering.
Hovering is a polite way to put it, Eric. It's more like a looming architectural shift. The DoD issued that class deviation, 2024-00013, back in May, specifically to prevent a situation where contractors would be contractually bound to Rev 3 before the assessment infrastructure was ready. If they hadn't, the moment Rev 3 went final, standard DFARS clauses would have technically required immediate compliance. And let's be honest, nobody was ready for that. But the mistake is thinking this pause means you can just sit on your hands.
Right, because Revision 3 is fundamentally different. It's not just a minor patch, like a point release. It completely restructures how the controls work. I mean, they aligned it with NIST SP 853 Revision 5, right? And they got rid of the old distinction between basic and derived security requirements. It's all just security requirements now.
Exactly. They collapsed that structural division. In Rev 2, you had basic requirements and derived requirements, which honestly created this weird artificial hierarchy. Now, it's a flat structure, directly mapped to the 853 catalog, which is the catalog federal agencies use. But the real kicker in Rev 3, the thing that is going to give compliance managers nightmares, is the introduction of ODPs, Organization-Defined Parameters.
ODPs. Right. I've heard this described as a double-edged sword. On one hand, it gives flexibility, but on the other hand, it means the government has to actually define those parameters, or the contractor has to define them and get them approved. How does that actually play out in a system security plan, an SSP?
Well, think of an ODP as a fill in the blank. In Rev 2, a control might say, restrict login attempts. In Rev 3, with ODPs, the control says, restrict login attempts to organization-defined number, attempts within organization-defined time period. Now, if you're a defense contractor, you can't just make those numbers up. The DoD has to issue a memorandum or a guide specifying what those values are. They actually released a draft ODP table, but until that's finalized and contractually binding, you have this state of limbo. If you're updating your SSP today, you have to maintain your current Rev 2 alignment while mapping out where these ODP blanks are going to land in your future Rev 3 state. It's duplicate work, essentially.
So they are basically giving contractors a little bit of breathing room because of the supply chain complexity, but only for those newly introduced controls. Everything else has to be green on day one. That brings us to CMMC, because they have been telling everyone that CMMC 2.0 is based on Revision 2. If the FAR and DFARS transition to Revision 3, what does that do to the CMMC rollout? We discussed this a bit during our CMMC Unlocked episodes, but this feels like a major potential conflict.
Well, they have to. And it's not just the ODPs. Rev 3 also introduces tailoring criteria. If you look at the assessment guide, they've added new requirements around supply chain risk management, independent assessments of security controls, and continuous monitoring. You are looking at a fundamental shift from static checklist compliance to active, risk-managed operational security. It is going to force a lot of small to mid-sized contractors to make hard choices about their IT investments.
So basically, they're attempting to align the target, but because of how slow the bureaucracy moves, contractors are essentially caught in the middle of a multi-year bridge. If you're a defense contractor right now, what is the play? Do you start building to Rev 3 now, or do you stick strictly to Rev 2 until the final rule drops?
So the key thing to understand is that CMMC is a vehicle for assessment, right? It doesn't actually write the security standards, it verifies them. CMMC Level 2 is explicitly tied to 800-171. Because of that class deviation, 2024-00013, the baseline for CMMC Level 2, remains Revision 2 for now. The final CMMC rule, which we've been tracking in the CMMC Unlocked series, is moving through its own federal rulemaking process. Even when that CMMC rule goes final and starts showing up in contracts, it's going to point to Rev 2 initially. But the DFARS rulemaking to update the standard reference to Rev 3 is running on a parallel track. It's like two trains running next to each other, and at some point they have to merge.
This is exactly like what we talked about in our Pentagon Cyber Rules Reset episode. The rulemaking process moves at a glacial pace, but once those final rules drop, the clock starts ticking fast. For contractors listening, the takeaway is clear. Do not wait for the final rule to start looking at those organization-defined parameters and Revision 3 controls. Start mapping them now. Paul, thanks for breaking down these complex requirements for us today.
Potentially, yes. Though the DoD has indicated there will be a phase-in period. They aren't going to pull the rug out overnight. But this is why the strategic pause on Rev 3 is so deceptive. It's not a pass to do nothing. It's a window of preparation. If you get certified under Rev 2, your 3-year certification cycle starts. But during those 3 years, you will almost certainly have to transition your internal systems to meet Rev 3 requirements as new contracts get awarded with the updated DFARS clauses. You have to design your systems today with the flexibility to adopt those Rev 3 ODPs without tearing down your whole infrastructure.
So what are the concrete next steps? If you're advising a defense contractor right now, who's caught in this interim phase, what do they actually do tomorrow morning?
First, do not halt your Rev 2 implementation. If you aren't fully compliant with Rev 2 today, you have zero chance of surviving the transition to Rev 3, let alone a CMMC assessment. Get your Rev 2 SSP solid. Second, conduct a preliminary gap analysis against the final draft of Rev 3. Focus heavily on those organization-defined parameters. Look at the draft ODP values the DoD released and test your current configurations against them. If the DoD draft says multi-factor authentication session termination after sweat, and your current policy is 8 hours, look at what it takes to change that. Start testing those tighter configurations now in a non-production environment so you know what breaks.
So they are running parallel processes, which makes the timing even more critical. But what about the actual rollout period once the rule is finalized? Do contractors get a grace period? Or is it an overnight shift to Rev 3?
Always a pleasure, Eric. Stay secure out there.